Good morning, friends. Penicillin is a gift from God to humanity. And penicillin is literally a divine intervention. And that miracle fell upon Alexander Fleming's culture plate. And that fungal spore changed the history and destiny of mankind. Penicillin became the cornerstone of modern medicine. More and more antibiotics were introduced into the armamentarium. And at one stage, we thought we had conquered the challenge of infections. And then medical community, including myself, misused, underused, and overused antibiotics and made them useless. And now we are going to live in a world without antibiotics, and literally in a world without antibiotics. The antimicrobial resistance problem, or the superbug problem, it's really a global problem. No country or continent could escape from the menace of superbugs. The gram-positive superbug problem, we can call it as MRSA, for example, is very common in North American countries and many European countries. But look at the South Asia or Mediterranean countries, the spectrum is different. We see a lot of gram-negative superbug problem in the name of New Delhi methylobetalactamase in South Asia, or KPC in America and Mediterranean countries. And now the spectrum is changing. Even North American and European countries are catching up with the gram-negative resistance problem, because the main problem in the world is gram-negative resistance problem, gram-negative superbug problem. This is my data. In India or other South Asian countries, the gram-negative resistance, we call it as New Delhi methylobetalactamase producing gram-negative superbugs. The problem is quite rampant. It's quite rampant. And I'm a clinician. Every day I see patients with severe infections due to gram-negative superbugs. And the mortality rate, the death rate is very high. It's more than 50% despite adequate treatment. It's a serious problem. In human body, there are more number of bacteria than human cells. Human intestine is full of bacteria. The number of bacteria in human body is many, many, many times more than the human cells. So look at the bacterial biomass in Asian countries. More than half of the world population is living in Asian countries. That's why we call South Asia is the major epicenter of the gram-negative resistance. And look at India. More than 1 billion population. More than 40,000 hospitals. More than 1 million doctors. More than half a million pharmacies in India. Indiscriminate antibiotic usage. And what else you need for resistance? What else you need for superbug problem? And that's a scenario in all South Asian countries. In 2010, Lancet published a landmark paper on New Delhi methylobetalactamase producing gram-negative superbugs. And that paper created a lot of political controversy. A lot of controversy on the naming of the NDA1, on health tourism, and we really forgot the importance of the resistance and we concentrated on the controversy. The first step in India on tackling antibiotic resistance was to change this attitude towards a positive, towards an open, and towards a realistic one. Attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference, Winston Churchill. The Lancet controversy created a lot of awareness about resistance in India, but a lot of negative attitude. And we had to change that negative attitude. In 2012, we called all the medical societies in India, called in representative of all societies, government representative, especially senior representatives of health ministry and all other stakeholders, and we held a landmark meeting in the Indian city of Chennai, a roadmap to tackle the challenge of antimicrobial resistance in India. It is extremely difficult to call in all the stakeholders, especially governmental representatives, under one roof. There is no functioning antibiotic policy in India at that time. And there is a very powerful lobby to oppose any move towards an antibiotic policy and restriction of antibiotic usage. Even to fantasize such a meeting was craziness. To organize such a meeting was madness. You're offending a very powerful lobby. But India needed that craziness, and India needed that madness because the resistance scenario in my country is very serious. We debated and discussed on the possible ways of controlling resistance in the country, and our consensus was India or other developing countries cannot have a very strict antibiotic policy. The possible ways, a liberal policy at first, and later when we ensure the success of a liberal policy, and then we can make the policy stricter. We can make the control on antibiotic usage stricter at a later stage. After the publication, again, it is not the Chennai Declaration meeting that is important. It is the way how we communicated with the government and stakeholders for preparation of the meeting. As the coordinator, literally, I had to send thousands of emails, thousands of phone calls, and hundreds of faxes to stakeholders, especially to Health Ministry. By the time the meeting was over, the government was already aware about the seriousness of the resistance issue. And after the publication, actually Chennai Declaration document is one of the most discussed about documents in medicine today. I can say that more than 12 international medical journals have published detailed reviews on the document. Almost every international infectious disease conference have discussed the document. Policy meetings, including World Health Assembly, have discussed the document. And that helped. Again, we started communicating with the ministry for getting the recommendations implemented. We have been regularly communicating with the senior officials in the ministry. We had many meetings in the Ministry of Health with senior officials, and we could raise the issue in Indian Parliament many times. We had discussion on the seriousness of antibiotic resistance in India. And then we could succeed in bringing out a new rule to control over-the-counter sale of antibiotics in India. The policy has already been implemented. It started 2 months ago. But again, India is a large country with more than 500,000 pharmacies and 40,000 hospitals and 1 million doctors. This implementation is not an easy task. It will take months or years for proper implementation of this rule. Be the change that you wish to see in the world, Mahatma Gandhi. Chennai Declaration hasn't made any change in the resistance statistics in the country. It will take a long time. But it changed the way how Indians and Indian authorities look at the resistance problem in the country. Chennai Declaration has set the wheel in motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul. You can tell he's the kind of guy who'd be very difficult to say no to. Now, again, just before we come to some questions for him, we've got another of our snap polls here coming up. Go to, again, www.govote.at, code as ever, 445622. This time it's a simple yes-no question. Should it be allowed, as is the case in some countries, to buy antibiotics without prescription? 1, yes it should. I'm shocked by the results voting so far. Shocked, I tell you. I'm just going to see if it gets a bit higher. There's a large number of people abstaining on this one. 44. Let's see if we can get it up past the 50 mark. Oh, 1. Yes, that's interesting. Okay. We'll leave it there. Would the 1 like to say why? Stick your hand up if you care to, or you may bask in a cloak of anonymity. Okay.
Hi, Rochelle Harris from DFID, Department for International Development. I didn't vote, but I would have said yes, actually. I'd have been the 2. Just in terms of thinking about the access to medicines problem in developing countries and the fact that you have very few doctors and health facilities per person. So actually access to, it's a much more complicated conundrum than in countries here where we do have access to prescriptions and doctors. So I just wanted to make that point that actually if you put that sort of policy in place, you'd really restrict access and use among developing countries.
I do agree with that answer. In fact, if you would have read the Chennai Declaration document, more and more people would have voted for that yes. Because in developing countries, access to medication is a serious problem. That's why the new rule on over-the-counter sale of antibiotics in India, we have included 24 antibiotics and all the TB drugs. Still, lots of antibiotics are outside the list where patients can go and buy over-the-counter. Many Indian villages or South Asian villages don't have doctors. If you put an absolute ban on over-the-counter sale of antibiotics, it's impossible for such a rule. So, yes is also correct answer.
You see, you made that speech beforehand. Now we should run the vote again and see what people say. A gentleman there with a question.
Yeah. I understand that could be a problem.
Hold it only works.
It doesn't function. But I believe that you could put a higher degree of what we call an answer. To the pharmacist who delivers, so that they have a responsibility. Yeah. Yeah, I know that, but that one didn't function. I believed I could reach anyone.
Okay, one more time. Hang on a second, coming in. It does function now.
I think that Anne has to tell us why prescription is still not the way to go. She told us about a doctor that gave her a prescription without a reason.
No, I was pretty clear.
No, Anne, didn't you tell us?
Yeah, I told the doctor. How she got the prescription? It was irresponsible prescription from the doctor. So that also happens, but this is a different question, I think.
Okay, there was another hand over here, but I think it's gone down now. Is anybody else who wants to ask a question? One from me then, just before you go. I mean, you've obviously put the emphasis on the doctors and the medical community. Do you think there's any hope of going directly to the people and actually seeing if you can change, if you can get a large percentage of people not to ask for antibiotics when they're not going to help? Isn't that going to be useful to this as well?
It's extremely difficult to communicate with 1 billion people.
I know.
We can try the media. There is some change in attitude by the media, but still not a great change. Media has to come forward, both print and visual media, and educate the people.
So it will happen, but it's going to be very...
We have got 1 million doctors. We have to educate them first.
That's a big target with 1 million doctors. Okay, Dr. Abdul Ghafur, thank you again.